Donald Feinberg, VP and Distinguished Analyst at Gartner, will discuss the impact of in-memory technology on the database market and recent advances in memory technology.
Until about 10, maybe a little more than 10, maybe 15 years ago, the database market had come to a point where there was not a lot of innovation, of new things that were happening. We at Gartner stopped doing our transaction magic quadrant altogether. We only did data warehousing because there was a certain amount of innovation that was taking place in the data warehousing market. And then about say 10 years ago, the hardware in the industry, the servers, the memory, the interconnections, the flash, all started to get faster and grow bigger. We also saw cloud come into the picture roughly 10 years ago. Not like it is today, but certainly started back then. So along came in-memory database, the idea of putting the entire database in memory. Not just increasing memory buffers so that they were faster because they didn't have to read data that was hot at the time. This did a number of things. What this did was allowed us to get much higher speed because we didn't have to wait for I/O. It allowed us to do multiple clusters of machines more easily for backup and recovery. So in-memory started to really change the way we started to think about databases. Additionally, it added a new architecture for transactions where we could actually do analytics inside of a transaction or a process. Gartner called that hybrid transaction analytic processing originally. Today we call it augmented transactions, being that the transactions are augmented with analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So the idea is that what's changed today is that the in-memory databases have enabled us to do things faster and larger and less complex. Now, of course, that also drove up the cost of the infrastructure to support larger memories, because as the memory sizes go over a few terabytes, like 3 to 4 terabytes, we end up with much larger servers that are much more expensive. So that the cost of going above 3, 4 terabytes of memory started to increase. That's where we are today. One of the big new innovations that has taken place recently is the introduction of persistent memory. Now, this has been something that's been a problem to people for years, which is DRAM. When you lose power, you lose everything that's in DRAM. With persistent memory, that problem goes away, because when we are set up for persistent memory, we end up not losing anything. It's non-volatile. We lose power, the data remains. Now, persistent memory sits between DRAM at the top, which is expensive, but also fast. Persistent memory is the next tier down, which is less expensive and not as fast. And then flash would sit down below that, which would be cheaper but slower than persistent memory. The other advantage of persistent memory is that it's created new technologies, which is in the future going to give us very large chip sizes. And we're going to be looking at persistent memory systems that range, I don't know, probably in the hundreds of terabytes eventually, all right? Now, why is this a good thing? First of all right, we can start to make things less complex. When we had scale out, we had all kinds of mechanisms to manage the scale out. That would cause us to have complexities. Now we're going back to the future. We're going to scale up, okay, where we can have larger memories on a single server, which is reducing TCO, and at the same time allowing us to reduce the complexity. Secondly, because of persistent memory, high availability and restart becomes simpler and faster. And if we restart the system, we don't have to reload everything into memory. it gives us a much better TCO and a much less complex environment. It is our opinion that pervasive memory is probably one of the biggest technological changes that is going to happen to servers and IT in general. So database and many other technologies within IT, probably in the last few years since maybe the internet and the cloud. And it is definitely as big as that. And by the way, it has a big impact on the cloud, because this is not only an on-premises technology, it's also a cloud technology. So why would cloud vendors want it? Because they can do more with less, because they don't have to worry about complex high availability, because restart times are faster. So all the same reasons cloud vendors are going to want it. But the other point is, as more and more moves in memory, speeds things up, that means cloud vendors can do more with less, and that gets passed on to their clients in the way of lower cost. I think the biggest issue here is the continuing increase in size of memory, therefore the increase in scale-up servers that can host more in memory, and therefore be able to support larger applications, enterprise-wide applications, and eventually, with this technology, theoretically, host an entire enterprise in a single server in memory. And it affects everything. We're going to see more and more use of in-memory analytics and in-memory artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's across all of data and analytics and across even other parts of the industry that are going to benefit tremendously from this. And remember, one of the big benefits, yes, the software has to be modified, but we're not talking about the end user's software. We're talking about database software, virtualization software. That's what has to change. This is transparent to the end user. And therefore, they get more speed, they get less complexity. In the cloud, they'll even get better pricing because of it. Okay, the TCO comes down and they don't have to change or know anything's even happening. Let me wrap up with a couple of recommendations to people who are watching this. Experiment with it now, but it's going to become mainstream, in fact, over the next 3 to 5 years as it becomes more available. Also, don't be afraid of it as a new technology, because it makes sense. It makes sense to make your environment less complex. It makes sense to increase the speed of restartability. It makes sense to increase the speed of the database by using in-memory technology and allowing you to adopt some of these new things like augmented transactions and that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be one of the native, I'm creating a brand new system that's going to take advantage of this. The vendors can modify their software to be able to take advantage of this technology. And as it happens, you want to be ready